Hi everyone, I'm Surya, one of the co-hosts of the Everything Cyber channel. Our channel is dedicated to upskilling ourselves and other cybersecurity professionals via technical conversations, practical labs, short videos, and much more. Shipping secure code is not an easy task. To identify threats throughout our code base, security professionals often rely on static application security testings, or also known as SAST tools. Now, SAST tools can have a huge impact in securing an application by identifying various vulnerabilities in code so we can detect the issues before they are shipped. But it's easier said than done. A poorly configured SAST tool always lights up like a Christmas tree and is very easy to drown in the flood of alerts. And the worst part is, if the alerts are not tuned, a lot of these alerts can be false positive. So getting value of a SAST tool can be really hard if it's not done right. High false positive rates, along with inefficient integration with developer workflows, can make SaaS tools a huge waste of time and money. So in this episode, we will explore how to make SaaS most effective for your team or organization, how best we can roll it out so it has the least amount of false positives and disruptions to make the SaaS tool a success. To do this, we have a very experienced guest, Siddhant Rath of Atlassian, affectionately known as Sid, to share how we have worked on successfully rolling out in a large organization like Visa, Atlassian, and many more. I will let him do a proper intro himself, and as always, we have our favorite co-host Kev to bring his application security knowledge to the conversation. This will be an info-packed episode. I'm super excited, so without further ado, let's get started.
Thanks, Surya, inviting me to this podcast. Just want to introduce myself. It has been a quite big, long journey for me. Like in application security, almost a decade now. I've worked with various roles as a pen tester, as a red team member. But the most learning phase of my life has been as a blue team member, where I started working in Visa as a blue team member, part of the security architecture as a DLC team. And there I got introduced into the SaaS platform. How do you integrate? What do you should do? What are the things that actually SaaS helps achieving it? And the learnings that I had in these, I'm trying to replicate the same things in Atlassian, but then it's again a learning phase when you start working and with different tools and different organizations. Then you have different sets of problems which you try to solve it. That helps you learn more about the things, and that I would say about myself. So really, thankful to Kev and Surya for inviting me to this podcast.
Yes, we're very excited to have you, Sid.
Yes, super excited, Sid. I know firsthand what an amazing and intelligent human being you are, working with you day to day. So I'm pretty excited about this episode.
Yes, it's just like, please, Kev.
Yeah, you definitely did not pay me to say that. I can guarantee. Cool. So before we dive into how do we successfully roll out SAST, I feel like a lot of audience who might not come from an application security background would not be familiar with SAST. So Sid, do you want to give a quick recap what SAST is and what kind of value it provides?
Sure, Kev. That's a good start. So definitely, as we say SAST, it's actually static application security testing by the term. What is SAST? The acronym stands for. So the main part of SAST is scanning the code that the developer writes to make sure that whenever the developer writes a code or tries to merge the code or push it into production, we make sure the code is not having any insecure coding practices which can lead to a vulnerability. Maybe namely SQL injection, access, a lot of vulnerabilities are there. So just basically scanning the codes written by developers against some rule sets to make sure this code is not vulnerable to any insecure coding practices. So that is what SAST is all about. So we have a lot of ways that SAST can work. SAST can work through rule sets. SAST can work through grep rules. Like different type of tools are there in market. Just we need to make sure what tool we want to use and which is suitable for our development environment and how we can make it successful. So that's a very important factor of SAST.
So if I understood what you said correctly, that SAST basically is a tool that automatically helps us, that scans our code base via different methods. It can be rules, it can be modules, different ways, and it identifies issues in the code base by looking at the code. And yeah. Exactly. Cool. So that in pen and paper sounds amazing, right? Like that's the best thing. That's the silver bullet. So now that we know SAST and what values it brings, what are also some of the challenges that can have with SAST? Like the main ones before we dive.
Yeah, greatest challenge with SAST is first thing is the rate of false positive. So because it's not human intelligence, it's just a rule book that we are trying to run against some codes written by our developers. So the problem with SAST is that your rule set is not optimized or it's not good. It creates a lot of false positive. And the second part is how do you implement SAST within your development lifecycle? It's part of your like the continuous CI/CD. It's been part of your developers PR checks. It's part of your IDE plugins. How do you do it? So the problem is supposedly a developer writes a code and he thinks it's perfect, but due to some like the rules set written by the SaaS or the tool, it says it's a high vulnerability, but it's actually not. Then what happens? It just breaks your code and tells developer, hey, you can't merge your code unless you fix it. So that becomes a problem for the developers. And if you're having such type of regular experience, then the developers get pissed off, and there your SaaS program starts like, no one is like, no, we don't want to get on board to SaaS. We don't want to use this tool. We don't want. So the greatest challenge is solving the rate of false positive and making the tool as smooth as possible for the developer so that it can be effective tool to actually find code vulnerabilities. So that's the greatest challenge. And the second part is how do you roll out? Because SAST is like, if you know any of the organizations that start, security is always not parity. Like a lot of times it's like manual code reviews, nothing is tool is not there. So when you onboard a tool already, you must be having a large code base or something like that. And after that, when you bring a tool on your plate and say, hey man, now we want to start the scanning of your codes and everything, then how do you roll out? How do you make sure that this gets adopted across the organization? So that's a different outlook for some organizations. It's like I would say companies which mainly deal with very private data or like finance or fintech. For them, okay, it's like you have to do it. It's a compliance, like it's BCI, DSS, and everything. Must do it. That's the thing. But some of the companies where it's more of like a products, they develop products and all that. So they say, we will do it. We will adopt it. It's like a very slow adoption process rather than because it's not compulsory. If nothing is compulsory coming up, it's always optional. So people start, okay, we will do it sometimes later or something. And that's the problem. How do you get it adopted across? So that's two set of challenges you can see when you implement any tool. It's not only SaaS. If you implement any tool, that's two of the challenges you see.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned false positives, which is it tells it's an issue when it's not an issue because it's not configured well. And secondly, the rollout is not like it's not straightforward because it's not as easy as turning on a button. It's like more strategic. I think adding on to that, apart from recently a lot of we have compliance like FedRAMP and other things come up which requires mandatory SAST, right? That's why we suddenly saw a huge uptick of all product companies and service companies, they starting to roll out SAST, and that's another thing, just as a call out. So yeah, that was a very good introduction to SAST, its the value and the challenges. Let's now talk about the tool itself. Right? Like we have so many different tools. Before we dive into and bring our credit card and go to shopping, well, the question becomes, hey, if it's just a bunch of rule sets that looks for a specific pattern, why not do it in-house? Why not have a dedicated team that does it? That way we can reduce the rate of false positives. That way we can reduce the costs potentially and other things. So building SAST in-house versus buying. What are the considerations throughout?
So when we say SAST as a tool, so like when we say building in-house, the problem with SAST is you have to build an entire new rule engine. How does the rules work? We have a lot of open source tools. We have Trufflehawk, we have GoSec, we have Bandit, which is community edition. People write rules and everything. But the problem, okay, now I have a rule set, but how do I create a control flow graph? I know the problem is now the source is at the sink is at some other place. The code has to flow from source to sink. Then how do I prepare a control flow graph and everything? So preparing the entire flow end to end, like preparing a rule engine, preparing a control flow graph, storing this data somewhere, like keeping this data for how long and everything. So it's a dedicated team of like, I have to build now and develop, and I'm preparing my own tool, which is already in a commercial version available in market. So it's a very resource intensive. It's a very it's when we say it's cost, it won't be a cost effective in that sense because you have to build an entire team of maintaining that tool, building that tool, and everything. So we thought that, like, when we thought, okay, why don't we build our own tool? But the problem we're building now, okay, now I start scanning repositories. If I would say some organization has around 11, 12,000 of repositories, now I start scanning it. You can see the amount of data it has. Now if I just scan one repository, if I have 1,000 findings, I have to keep a track of those 1,000 findings, when it is getting fixed, when it's getting purged, or everything, like how when it's getting resolved. That 1,000, I have to have like recurring scans have to be done. Everything I have to maintain the control flow graph. Okay, now the data is flowing from here. I have to build a UI. I have to build everything. So that's a very resource intensive and a costly program when I try to build it myself. So if you would see, if building a SaaS tool in-house is so easy, then if you see the commercial tools now we have in market, they won't have been there ever because it's so costly and so difficult or so resource intensive. That's the reason the commercial, like the companies like Checkmarks, Veracode, IBM AppScan, everyone, 45, they're selling this SaaS tool as a product to everyone because they know it's not that easy to build in-house things. So that's the main reason it's better. Like if you see in that way, procuring a tool is a easier option or a cost-effective option rather than building it your own. Very big engineering team, maybe like Google or maybe like Facebook, they have a very big engineering team which has to build it somehow. They can't do it. I'm not sure if they're building their own tools or something like that, but maybe that's the thing. But for companies like us, where our products are more important, like we get our revenue by selling our products, and just building a team to build an in-house SaaS tool rather than getting those quality time of the engineers into our products, we can build much more feature-rich products. It's always important that I put my developers into my products and just developing an in-house tool.
The reasoning behind is, at the surface level, it might look like, oh, I need to just write those rules and then somehow have that rule start scanning, and there we go, we have our SaaS product. But
Yes.
it's like that iceberg image where you can see the top of the iceberg and the below is so many, like management, adding new rules, like you need to constantly look out for threats, vulnerabilities, and you have to add them. And then it's not about just the functionality, it's the user experience. You need to add those control flow diagrams and other things, and these things pile up, right?
Right. So the best part I would give an example is, if you know, there was an open source project known as CodeQL, which was it was open source. So when it was GitHub, which was acquired by Microsoft, right, or GitHub, yeah. When GitHub was acquired by, so actually they acquired the CodeQL part also. So this still the CodeQL is the rule engine which it was acquired by Microsoft, and that was the main reason of like GitHub having CodeQL as a SaaS tool, and that's the reason. So if you see, GitLab has also its own tools, set of tools, but it's all open source, and that's why they're having this. So the problem, even I would say in Atlassian also, we try to do something like that using open source tools, orchestration platform, try to have all open source tools and build everything. But the problem, we had all the issues, everything. But the problem was the rate of false positiveness was so high. Who's going to try it? Because I'm a security engineer, I do not know the code as a developer knows its code. And I just see the issue line. Okay, this line has this code, this error. But how do I triage? Where do you find the source? Where do I find the sink and everything? So that's become a great challenge. Even how do you maintain it? Like now I mark it false positive. Maybe second time also 3 occurs. Does it keep a track? Okay, this is the fingerprinting. This is the issue ID. It doesn't come up again once mark it false positive. So that's again another challenge that we have with open source tools and all that.
It kind of reminds me of a security operations standpoint where fine-tuning rules is very key. It is very key to reduce your false positive rate so you have as many true positives as possible. And that'll not just reduce alert fatigue, which is very common, where you just get so many alerts, you're like, man, I can't go through all of this. This is too much. And you end up in a situation where people just start skipping alerts. They're like, I've seen this before. There's nothing much. And that is very dangerous. Like once you start skipping those alerts, that means like something has been raised, but you think it's not important enough. And that surely affects. That's where fine-tuning and management of the tool is probably the number one priority.
So that's when the place when we started, after analyzing this, the part of why we need a commercial tool and everything. So then we started, like in Atlassian, we tried to have evaluated different types of tools and everything. So mainly, like whenever a company starts evaluating a SaaS tool, there are some of the factors that you have to keep in mind. So there comes the second part, like why not like open source or in-house tools, why to go for commercial? But with commercial, get different options. But the best suited option is for industry, like for your org is different. Maybe it's different for someone else. It's something different for different org. So that's why you have to think what are the main things that you want to think while procuring a SaaS tool from any vendor. So if I would say in Atlassian, when we started, like we had something very clear idea in mind, what we needed. So we had a great discussions among our security engineers, everyone, and then we thought, what are our priorities? So like as I said, the first priority is the rate of low false positive rate has to be very low. Second part is the true positive. We should not miss on any true positive. This is a very interesting topic. Why I would say is like we evaluated a tool and they said we have very good. I wouldn't name any tools, but I would say when it was a very new startup, we evaluated that tool and they said we have a very good rate of true positive and very low rate of false positive. We were very happy and we started using that. We did a POC with that tool. The problem was the rate of true positive was good, but rate of false positive was good, but it was very less. But they missed out on true positives, and that was the challenge. So we can accept some false positive, but I don't want to miss on any true positive. That's another part. So that was another thing that we had in mind. Like the rate of false positive, how it's the second part is the adoption, how easy it is to roll out in your org. Because if you know a lot of tools they have ready rollout for GitHub, GitLab, but within Atlassian we use Bitbucket, which is our own product, and it's more of an enterprise version than an open source version. So what happens is that a lot of tools they do not have out of box solution for Bitbucket. So we wanted to make sure that whatever tool you want to procure, it should have seamless integration with our Bitbucket. And there are two instances. We have Bitbucket Cloud, we have Bitbucket Server, and with both it should have a seamless integration. That was another main criteria. The third criteria is the deployment model. Like it should be easy to deploy. It's not like very difficult. The management of the deployment is not difficult. Like every time they release everything, we have to again patch it or we have to upgrade the version. We can't have an operations team just to maintain a tool. Again, it's very difficult. The next part was when we scan any application or any code, it should be not very time consuming, or if it's a part of a CI/CD, I cannot just wait till the scan completes. It has to be quick. It has to be good enough that it doesn't take a very long time to just scan our code, and it can be done very quickly and at a good rate. And that's what second part. There's something a lot of teams say we want incremental scanning. So what is incremental scanning is supposedly now Surya is writing a code, but it's not the entire code. It's just part of a module. He's writing it and he wants to scan just that part of the code. He doesn't want to scan the entire code. So because scanning the entire code, which is like 80,000 lines, 80,000 Java files, it may take around 45 minutes. But if I just scan around 10,000 line of code, it may be done in just 2 or 3 minutes. So instead of, I just want to scan my code. It's called incremental analysis. Just what is the div? What is the change in the delta part of the code? Just scans that and gives you the results. And tells, okay, this part of code is good. You can go ahead and merge it. So we wanted something like that. And that was the best. And the last part is how easily it can be integrated with the developer lifecycle, the development lifecycle. So it's nothing like at the end it should just scan. It should scan at the PR. It can be scanned with the IDE plugins. It can be done with everything. So these are some of the main criteria that we had while deciding what are the tools that we want and why we want it. That's something. And there's just other very small things is like vulnerability description should be clear. It should have SSO integration. So these are all the second part, but these are some of the major part of the things what I discussed while integrating or procuring any SaaS commercial tool you should have in mind. That's very important. And how can you fine tune the rule engine? Can you write your custom rules and all that? So I would say I have used checkmarks. I have used a lot of tools. I have used Spotify. I have used IBM AppScan, integrating with various things and everything. So the part is like writing a custom rule is very important part, because sometimes what happens is you have your code and there is some very custom libraries you use it, very custom methods you use it. And that time I just want to have a rule set just to scan that part of the code. Maybe that's not out of the box solution available with any SaaS tool, but I should have the liberty to write my own rules so that I can scan my code as per that. Maybe some team uses some methods, some libraries, other teams use some other libraries, and I should make sure, okay, For this, I have this rule set. For this team, I have this rule set, and that's where I can do it. It's a tailored fit rather than a one size fits all.
It is absolutely key to write your own rules too, not other than just for it to fit team. There's also like new threats that come out or new vectors that are found, and you're like, okay, it's time for me to integrate this and check if any of my code is vulnerable to this new attack vector. And sometimes like the fastest way to do that is to write a custom rule rather than waiting for a product owner to them to release a rule set for that.
Right.
And sometimes you can't rely on them, right? Because, for example, if you are a product company like Atlassian, and if we have detected a new vulnerability internally, there is pretty much no support from any of the products unless we can write our custom rules. Because like the only way that those rules will come is when we disclose it, but we don't want to disclose it before we have checked all of our code base. So there's a chicken and egg problem. So that's where things like extensibility. So if the question is how to choose the best tool for your org, the things you mentioned was first, identify your core requirements. Like, what are your core requirements? Do you want a very good rate of true positive or low rate of false positives or both or whatever is your business requirement, right? I can't think of any business cases where you wouldn't want any of that.
The thought process is like, let the rate be like for fintechs. They would say, okay, let the false positives be there, but we don't want to miss any true positives, something like that. For product companies, the main thing is developer productivity. So maybe like true positive, we don't want to, like no company wants to miss on true positive, but the main focus is only false positive. The rate of false positive should be very low. That's how the thing that mind thinks like. And definitely, if you optimize a SaaS tool, we say the rule engine is so optimized that the rate of false positive less than 5%. That's normally if the figure we take, less than 5% of rate of false positive should be. The problem is like it's always when you procure any tool, it's not like a service they give you right away. It's a value added service. You have to pay extra. Like a lot of companies, SaaS tools you procure, they say, okay, we will fine tune your rule engine, but you have to pay extra so that we will help you fine tuning the rule. They take the metrics, they take the data, they try to analyze it, and they try to optimize the rule set, and they give you. That's a professional service they charge, like additional service they charge. So that's their market. That depends. Like if you have a lot of big budget, you want to take that professional service, you can do it. Or else it can be done by the security engineers themselves. If they have the control of the rule set, they have the controls of everything. They prepare the data, they see, okay, for how many repos or for this product, I'm getting this type of issues, and this type of issues doesn't make sense for me. So I can disable this rule engine or disable this rule, or I can optimize this rule, something like that. It can be done by security engineers by themselves also. So that can be also done.
Yeah. I suppose the pricing part or the cost part is basically purely based on your organization, whether you're a small organization and you need to rely on open source, and you can look into different open source. Is this good enough for me? Or even if you're a large organization, you might have other good security practices that don't require you to have a very robust SAST, as long as there is some. So you can just go with that. So you need to decide that. Other things that can help you mentioned was first adoption, like how flexible it is, like where can in the developer workflow can it be adopted, as well as how easy is it to roll out. With rollout, you mentioned deployment. So deployment is like how easy for us to deploy new rules, maintain the rules, all that things. And last but not least, which was extensibility, that, okay, if we wanted to write our custom stuff or add more stuff, how easy it is to do that. So all those are the different factors. Interesting.
Yeah, so now that we've got that information sorted on how you could select the right tool for your organization, how do you now successfully roll that out into your organization? It sounds like a pretty big task, like getting it to this stage where you're like, hey, I can start monitoring. But now how do you like maintain it? How do you improve your developer practices and so on?
So that's, I would say, the most difficult part of anything. Like maybe it's not SaaS, it's any tool that you roll out. It's the most difficult part is the adoption across your entire org or entire company. How do you do that? So that's the greatest challenge. And the thing is, when I said adoption, if it comes from top to bottom, like the senior management says, oh, it has to be done. your life is half done. Like it's half easy, half work is done. You don't have
You
to
have
worry
the
about
budget
it because
approved, and you're
yeah,
just, yeah, you
you're
have your
just
credit card, and you can
yeah,
go shopping.
everything. Yeah, it's all like that. It's half done. But if it's like, yeah, the senior management is like, yeah, we will roll out on something, and you are trying to push everyone to get it. So that's the difficult part. And like now when we say security across any industry, it's more of a proactive approach than a reactive approach. So everyone is happy to be a proactive than be a reactive. Earlier, when security was not important, we relied a lot on pen tests, we relied a lot on bug bounty findings coming from like from the security researchers, and then we fix it. But when we try, and actually we pay a lot of bounty on, like when we get any bugs, tasks can be a very good. It's not the silver bullet, I would say, but it's a very good tool. Like very minor issues on stored excesses or reflected excess, you pay out around $800 to $1,000 to a researcher. You can just save it having a SaaS tool. Already, if your in-house SaaS tool is there, you can readily tell your developers to use these things, and you can fix this thing than paying a $1,000 or $1,200 bounty to any researcher. So I would say it doesn't catch everything. Like the authorization issue, that's really difficult to catch by any task or dark tool. It's more of a pen test application. Like when pen test, you catch those things, but using a very vulnerable method, which can be vulnerable to RCs and all that thing. This can be very easily. Like I have a custom rule. I see, okay, any developer using this type of methods, it can flag, okay, this is RC or something. So the best way to push, I would say, is start, like when you procure a tool, you can start with a piloting program. At least identify some of the teams, or just pitch in and say, hey folks, why don't you try this SaaS tool and see how the things are, how your developer work experiences, like within your developer like development life cycle, or the developers using this thing, how their experiences. So in the same way, we started in Atlassian also, we started piloting with a lot of teams. We reached out to security champions with the different teams, and we onboarded their applications. We got their feedback. So regularly we had meetings with those developers to understand what are the problems they are facing, and what are the things they want to get improved, so that we can take these feedback before the mass rollout and try to improvise or they improve the tool, the rule engine, the rule set, and everything. Get feedback to the vendors. Hey man, this is not working. You have to improve this, improve that. And then when things are actually starting to look good, not even great, but good, then you can start onboarding more teams. And at least when you have, I would say, 10 or 15% of the organization on your piloting phase, then you can plan for a mass rollout. And when I say plan of mass rollout, I would say you should have the entire thing seamless. Like, how do you onboard? If now supposedly I'm going for a mass onboarding and I have a team which has around 50 or 100 repos, I can't manually onboard all 100 repos. There should be some sort of automation. They just say, hey man, this is my product. This is my project ID in Bitbucket. Please onboard all my repos. Or this is a selected repos you onboard. So you should have a seamless onboarding program. You should have a seamless developer experience. Like, how do I onboard? How do I give access to the developer to this portal, or the where they can view the vulnerabilities and everything? How do you file bugs? Like, you can't file bugs for each and every issue, because the rate of false positive with every SaaS tool is normally high. It's not like every finding is a confirmed finding. You have to triage these findings. So you should have a proper workflow of triaging the findings. You should have a proper way of filing tickets for the true positives and everything. Then you can opt for a mass rollout. So that's the main thing. Going for a mass rollout, the first option I would say is adoption is piloting. If the piloting is a success, or you learn your mistakes while piloting, what has been done and what has to be done. When the piloting is good, then you have to plan for a workflow. How the workflow should look like. When I start onboarding, okay, I get this tickets. Who is going to triage this ticket? Is the security engineers? Is the developers? Because developers understand the code very well rather than the security engineers. Yeah, no doubt. Security engineers understand the acronyms, the wordings, and everything. But the developer should also understand why this is a bug. So you should have proper documentations. You should have, maybe should have like the first part is secure coding practices. We have a secure coding practices documents. So now I say sanitation, I say input validation, I say cross-site scripting. The developer may not understand what is a cross-site scripting. At least we should have a page of acronyms. The developer says, oh, cross-site scripting is arbitrarily executing any script within my page or something like that. He understands that. Then how do you do not allow the things? There's a rule set, how to fix the code, at least write the things. You should have this type of code snippets to fix the code, which is like your custom codes. Like we know I use HTML output encoding, I use maybe input sanitation or something like that, or all these parts to avoid excesses. But how I do it for my code in Atlassian, how it is done. So maybe I should have a coding practice or coding guidelines so the developer can refer. Okay, I should write my code in this way. Someone in my Atlassian team has written this code snippet, which can help me avoid excesses, vulnerabilities going forward. He understands that. He adopts that type of code. So what happens is that across the same org, the coding standards remain standard. Like one platform, one type of code is there.
Yep.
If someone is writing something else, someone using some library, someone is using ESAP filter, someone is anything. Anyone can use anything. But if you have a standard, it becomes uniform across industries. And my like in Atlassian, this normal way of avoiding the issues. So that part of document should be also there before rolling out. Then once that is done, okay, I adopt more teams, I get more feedback, then mass rollout, mass adoption. The thing has to be, how do you do it? How do you onboard it? The automation should be in place. The workflow should be in place. That is done. Okay, now it's a success, but now I have to reach out to the teams. How do it? Maybe through compliance. That's the best part, I would say. Maybe every team has something called like before releasing any production, like merging the code, it has like in Atlassian we have PRGB, peer review green belt, where we say it has to be reviewed by two folks. All this checks should be there, and everything is like green. Then you are allowed to merge it to the master branch. Similarly, why not SAST is one of that green ticks. If SAST is also there, then only you are able to merge. Like anyone who is peer reviewing your code has to also see the SAST results for whatever code you have written. So if you make it that as a part of a compliance or something like that, give 2 months time to every developer or every development team. Okay, we have enabled these things. We are giving you 2 months time. Till 2 months, you can start using Sneak. You can start seeing the bugs and everything. But after 2 months, then it will be scored in your scorecard or something like that. Every organization has their own scorecard or something where they measure the metrics. If it's green, yeah, the security posture is good. If it's red, the security posture is not good. And we have something like that. Once the compliance part is there, we give some times, maybe a quarter time, maybe 2 quarters of time to the development team, and then we start scoring them. Then okay, now everyone wants a green. The senior management see, hey, why your product is not in green security? It's still red. You're not using SaaS. We have procured tool, we have paid money to the tool and everything, so you have to use it. And now that option starts slowly. So it will take time. It will not happen overnight, but maybe a year or something, and it will eventually happen. So that's, I would say, a mass adoption. But it's in Atlassian case, it has been like this because we are very developer friendly organization. For us, the developer productivity is as good as security, and we cannot hamper the productivity only because of security. It has to be in hand. Security should be in hand with developer productivity. But I would say in fintechs, the major priority is security. So there you do not have a timeline or something. You roll out, hey man, your score is not good, you have to onboard to SaaS. You do not get a sign up to release to production unless the security phase of your SaaS results are good. So in fintech, it's rather than like a very strict approach where we have these things. And so in Visa, even I would say the thing was like that. Even in HTML, you change from bold to italics, a character that has to also go through a security review. It cannot go like that. So it is to be that strict, and so that's how things were in fintechs and Atlassian. Yeah, we trust our developers, no doubt. We trust our developers. Yeah. We do everything on that part, but definitely there can be some mistakes.
That was a big load of information. My head is definitely spinning. I'll try to quickly summarize, and Surya and as well as Sid, please chip in if I've missed anything. So I'm just trying to make it structured in my head. So on the very further end, let's say when it's the phase where either you are driving the adoption or management has already approved it. If management has approved it, your life is good. But if you're driving it, then your suggestion is use the cost of missing a vulnerability, if the vulnerability was missed, and how much impact it can has, as well as the cost we are already paying, like its internal team, as well as how much time is it taking for an internal team to identify, triage, and fix that one, as well as bug bounties. try to put it in numbers, dollar values,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, it is the business
Right.
value that drives the decision. So like that is the best way to sort of
Yep.
get the conversation started.
Right.
And then basically, when you have the support, the developer friendly way of rolling out is to first figure out, okay, come up with a roadmap, and in the roadmap you talk with a few teams that are ideal to roll this out. It might be a team with a high number of vulnerabilities. It might be a team that has security champions or that kind of program where you have already an existing good relationship.
Right.
And you launch a pilot. And
Right.
based on the pilot, you fine tune it and you create some documentations and everything that needs to be done. And then you go towards mass adoption.
Right.
And in that mass adoption, you cannot just flick a switch and forget. You need to,
Right.
the developers will panic, like, hey, we have so many vulnerabilities. Like in Atlassian, I remember even for our tools, we only file certain severity of vulnerability.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, because otherwise it's too many tickets. So we start with very high priority tickets and slowly roll out to other tickets. What was the other thing you mentioned? Like, how do we make sure that developers don't freak out from all this?
So the part is like, give them time. You do not give them 2 months of time as a compliance, you onboard and something, and things are fine. Then 2 months timeline is there. They know something is coming. It's not like overnight a tool has been onboarded. They're mentally prepared. Things are working, and after maybe a quarter or 2 quarters time, they know this is going to be scored somewhere in scorecard or how the metrics are going to look like.
Yeah.
And then they're already mentally prepared. It's not like overnight things are changing. So because that gives them time to prepare for everything. There's sprint cycle and everything they know. Because everything in development works on the sprint cycle. They know we have to fix these bugs before maybe 6 months. So I have to plan this my sprints, and they start working on that.
So once that pilot is success, and once you have rolled that to a few teams successfully, and you have done that base, then you make it a requirement. Either we use something called security scorecards. It can be whatever enforcement mechanism your company has, right? Or your organization has, because that's the way to do mass communication. Otherwise, some teams might not know that this is a requirement. Once you have the basis, then you turn it on, and then it's a requirement now everyone needs to adopt. And then you mentioned something very good, that adoption, to scale it up, you cannot go to each team and help them on board repo by repo. You need to come up with an automated way of people to, it's like a self-service.
Self-service.
It's self-service.
Self-service person just there for onboarding reports. It's like very much automated. But I'm a manager, the engineering manager. I want to report 10 reports. I get the lists, get onboarded. Start scanning. I do not worry.
Okay. Well, one quick question I had, will follow up with this, Sid, is the metrics. Like, is the metrics, I know the obvious one is how many high, medium, whatever vulnerabilities the tool is capturing, but is there any other metrics, or what are the main metrics we use to measure?
So there are many metrics that we want to judge the success of a SAST in organization. The first is how many of repos are being scanned or onboarded into your SAST program. Supposedly, I have around 10,000 repos, but I only scan 1,000 repos. How does the success look like? It doesn't look good. I still miss out on 9,000 repos, which might have a good number of vulnerabilities, or which are also production repos. So we have to classify that all production repos, which are actually having a production code, should be scanned.
So the coverage.
The main part is the coverage. Once the coverage is done, then you see the effectiveness. So the effectiveness is what's the rate of false positives being reported. Then we see, okay, the rate of false positive is a bit high. We have to fine tune. We have to write custom rules. And so we have to come up with rule sets, maybe for product wise, repo wise, something like that. The second part is, as I said, the effectiveness is the rule number of false positive. Second part is when I say, so that should actually, before that, just one thing. How many issues are being triaged? Maybe coverage is good. I have now 95% coverage. But the second part is on the effectiveness. Once the tool scans the code, who is triaging those issues? Who are actually looking into those? You have to make sure that actually developers are looking into those codes and they're trying to fix these codes, or they're trying to put comments, okay, these are false positive. So that's the second part I would say is the triaging of the issues, or how effective is my tool is going to be in my development life cycle. So that's the second part I would say, the triaging of the issues. The third part comes is the rate of false positive. Now, as developers are trashing the issues, they're putting comments. Okay, this is false positive because we are using this library, or we are using this type of code, or we are using this authentication. This data is coming from upstream where it's already sanitized or something like this. Comments are coming. Once these comments come up, we try to work on that comments, improvise our rule, improve our rule engine, improve our SAST program. That's the third part of effectiveness. The rate of false positive has to eventually decrease to less than 5%, even much more less than that's better. So these are the three main things I would say: the coverage, the effectiveness of how it's helping your SDL's life cycle. The third part is the rate of false positive. That's if these three you're covering it, then yeah, your SaaS program looks like a successful SaaS program across industry, and you're doing it good.
Okay. The triage part seems very important because without the triage part, you do not know your rate of false positive.
Yeah.
And if you don't do triage, you cannot fine tune your rules.
The rule engine.
Yeah. So,
It's not possible. Yeah.
is this triage? Is this the developers doing it, or is it the security engineers doing it, or is it a mix of both?
So the best part actually it should be the because if you see as I said, I'm scanning 10,000 repos. Maybe each repo, if it's a very big repo, it has around 300, 400 high findings, or even 200. This code has never been scanned. Supposedly this code was developed 20 years ago, but has never been scanned, and it has around 150 high findings or more than that. So now the security engineers pitch in and just try to see the code. The problem is the security engineers can verify a lot of part, but actually the developers can do it much quicker. So now I, being a security engineer who has never seen that code, just to understand code, it may take me around 5 minutes. But a developer who knows this code, who is regularly working on that, who has actually written that code maybe 6 months ago, he sees this code and says, hey man, I know this is actually not this because I'm using this type of controls. And it just triages very important, like very quickly. So it's all, and you cannot scale because we keep on hiring developers in each development team, but the security engineers, you cannot scale in that manner. If you go to any organization, the security engineers are very few. Maybe it's for a team of around 10,000 engineers, maybe security engineers will be around 200. So you can think of, you cannot scale security in that way. So it's always important to give the developers the control to triage their own findings. In that way, you can scale your SaaS program. So that's the thing. Once they triage the findings, maybe they can put the comments across, and then a security engineer comes and sees and reviews the comments. Okay, whatever comment he has put, he says, I am using ESAP filters to all my output, like HTML output, including I'm using ESAP filters or something. I'm escaping these characters. You see these things and you see, okay, fine, the controls look good. I think it's a false positive. You mark it as false positive. So maybe the developer should not be given the right to market. I might be wrong, but my thought process is the developers should triage the findings and then propose to market as false positive. And the security engineers control to make sure, okay, actually these are false positive. And once security engineers mark this false positive, maybe the SaaS team can look into this false positive, improvise the rule engine or improve whatever rules they want, disable that rule set or something like that. So it's the developers who should triage the findings. And that way you can scale your SaaS, or else it becomes very difficult to scale your SaaS.
Yeah, I think the process part is very key in terms of any tool deployment, not just SaaS. In terms of any tool, if you want to use, having a standardized process that people understand, people are used to, it makes life easier for all the teams that are being involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a follow-up question, and I think this is a follow-up question of a follow-up question. And this is very important, right? Because, well, for an organization the size of us, Atlassian, right, it's understandable. Like we have 10,000 plus employees and maybe half or more are developers. We have huge workforce. But what if it's a startup, right? And what if there's a number of developers are low, but you have more other business requirements like, let's even take a step back and think holistically, because when you ask people to triage it, it's going to take some time and you're asking for additional work. And so if you come and say, hey, can you do this extra work? Can you make sure that these are actually true or not? And the developers, as the first reaction could be, no, because I want to pump out new features and get that promotion. Right. So my priority is creating those new features, like make the product better and better, right? In terms of features. And even that's sometimes not a liberty. At places like startups who actually can be benefiting more from SaaS than large organizations because they don't have a lot of security crews. So that automated things provide huge value for them. And I think that episode we did with Brian on how to start application security at a startup or any company, they spoke a lot about leveraging tools and automation. Anyways, getting sidetracked. My main question was, when it's a small company and the developers are already quite focused on, there's a requirement on pump out as many new features before this deadline set by the venture capitalist. Otherwise, they'll pull the money out. So in those kind of situations, how do you communicate as the security person on the value of triaging?
So yeah, that's a very nice question, Jeff. I would say. So any startup, when they start with this, the security actually is the least priority that time, because first thing is the feature release. So there may be the security, because first of all it's a startup. So maybe the product or that you're launching or the product you're working on is the only product. It's not in that scale. Like I would say in Atlassian, the scale of products we have around 20 plus products, and we have around 5,000 plus developers working there. And there maybe I have 2 or 3 products where the developers are mainly focusing into, and I know what the line of code is. Maybe there, when I start looking at a SaaS program or something like that, I'm trying to deploy it, and the triaging part, maybe the security engineers, they can take an extra step to triaging that findings, and maybe just to make sure the developers are not bugged or the developers are not doing it, maybe because that time the main focus is building the feature. The security engineers, they can jump in. Like even in the piloting phase when we started, it was a security engineer. It was me and my team who used to jump up and do the triaging instead of I'm going to the developers, because I want to give them a good experience. It's like I'm selling the product to them. It's like they are my customers and I am SaaS engineer. I want to sell my product. So I have to be very polite. I have to sell my product. I will say, hey, I'm writing the findings. I see these are the findings and everything and all that. So once they understand it, it's helping them. So the main thing before a developer buys the SaaS thing into their pipeline or into their development lifecycle is they should find that it's useful. It's contributing to their feature or their development lifecycle, rather than just being a block hole or being a bottleneck for them. So it's very important for them to buy in that it's actually helping the productivity. So in that case, I would say even they can have an ID plugin. A lot of tools. Sneak has an ID plugin, Community Edition, they have ID plugin. They can just install ID plugin, they can run. I am writing a code, I just click on scan. It just shows me, okay, everything is good. I go ahead, I push my code and all that. So that's something, or that's the thing. The security team, they can just jump in, they can triage the findings for them at least and tell them, hey man, I see these are some of the issues. Maybe there's the high issues, you can just focus on mainly high one and fix this thing. Low and medium are not that priority at least. And that way you can just jump in. So that's the approach one can take, rather than just giving everything to the developers. Hey man, you have to fix everything. And when you say that,
that's
developers like, hey, that's not my duty. I was hired to develop. I was hired to write new features. I'm not fixing these things right now. This is not my sprint in any way coming up.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
No, I think that is a good approach. So for the question of like, how do we approach the developers and how do we make sure they adopt? And it's not just going and dropping it that, hey, you do it, but it's first thing you mentioned is the making the product value really stand out. So doing POCs, doing demos, doing different ways really stand out. Okay, this is how it's going to add value. And have it integrated, like instead of going to a dashboard looking at different things, maybe have different ways to integrate it to their workflow so their UX is hampered the less. And the last but not least is prioritization. Like if you're a very small company, then maybe instead of looking at the 100 different alerts, maybe just look at the critical one and just the high ones, and then prioritize and go from there. I think that's definitely very ideal. Well, we are hitting the 50-minute mark, so I think we would not have time for the other 2 questions. We have covered the meat of how to roll out a SaaS. The question we can pretty much quickly wrap up and say, like, if you can really quickly and shortly summarize it, is unforeseen challenges and pitfalls, like things you didn't estimate or didn't predict might happen when you were trying to roll out first. So were there anything like that can jump out and our audience can maybe be aware of it from the...
A lot of pitfalls, actually. I would say. So majorly when I started like here in Atlassian, the major thing was like we had two different environments. We had something called a Bitbucket cloud. We had something called Bitbucket server. The integration with cloud is much more easy, but cloud integrating with our server was difficult because it was intranet, was not exposed to outside the world. How do I scan something which is not exposed to outside world? Because Sneak had a SaaS platform. It is nothing I'm deploying it within my own environment or somewhere I can do it. So how do I do it? So there are a lot of challenges. How do I do it? Where do I do it? So integration part is always a challenge for any org. Like when you start piloting the POC, you do it on a very small scale. But when you start the major integration or something, there you can have a lot of problems. So there are tools like checkmarks where the deployment has model is in-house. Where do you deploy it? What is the VM? What is the requirement? How many rule engines you want to deploy? What is the relational database that you want to deploy? Everything. How frequently you want to change it? When you want to purge the data? How do you want to have a user management? So these are everything. While the pitfalls, like these are the things that you have to think of while deploying something. That was a very big challenge for me. While like not, it's only with SaaS. Like any tool you roll out, the integration part is one big thing. How do you integrate with your different tools, different workflows, and everything? That's one big challenge. And second is maintaining that. That's another big challenge. So if it's in-house, you have to maintain it. Maybe today I'm running a version of 8.1 something. Tomorrow they release 8.12. Before upgrading, I have to do a proper testing. Okay, 8.12 is finding all good issues. I just upgrade, doesn't break anything. It doesn't break my workflow because everything is integrated already. If I want to upgrade to a new version, I have to make sure the upgradation is well tested before it's getting rolled out because already my workflow is working fine. Now I suddenly upgrade. Now I see developers complaining, hey man, my Jenkins is breaking. Hey man, your scan is breaking. I'm not able to push anything. My thresholds are not working perfectly. So that's everything. You have to make sure before upgrading everything is working fine and nothing is breaking your things or breaking your workflows. So these are some of the challenges you have to think of. The last but the least challenge is improving your rule engine, maintaining it, continuously monitoring your rule engine, having custom rule sets and all that. That's an ongoing program. As you start with SaaS, maybe year long, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it will take just to fine tune the thing. So that you learn how you while implementing.
Okay, so in terms of the hidden pitfalls, I could see two categories. One is post-deployment and one is pre-deployment. Pre-deployment, you might not understand your developer environment where your code is being built, packaged, and everything properly. Right. So when you go to then deploy it, something sudden can jump at you. So understanding your developer environment before you deploy and choose and buy something, and you already spend the money, is very important. And the second part, post deployment, is a lot of people rush into buying and deploying it, but they don't give a lot of thought on maintenance. So for the maintenance side, you also it's not only just the overall day-to-day maintenance and upgrading, but also the rule engine. Like the tool might be really good now, but who maintains the long-term rule set? Is it the vendor? Are they good at it? Is it a third-party tool? Yeah, exactly.
That's very important.
Interesting. Cool. So those are some of the things for the audience to definitely consider as well. That was all the time we had. Unless Surya, you want to add something very quickly?
I think that covered pretty much the big chunk of rollout.
Yeah.
What pitfalls? What are the key learnings that Sid had from his rollout? I can see there's some pretty interesting ones, and how we can take that and probably use it in our own rollouts.
Certainly, just I again repeated, my head is spinning from all the different things that has been said. I wish we'll try to make some visuals at the ends, so the things we usually make for our channel. But look out for those for the audience as well. But no, thank you so much, Sid. It was really fun and super insightful. This was way beyond than I was expecting. And this is super fun. Not that I was underestimating you, just just on how much content the episode might have. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks to the audience who have listened so far. If you just prefer the audio format, we are slowly planning to roll out not just in Spotify, but in all audio podcast platforms, hopefully soon. As soon as Surya does it, we'll be there. So keep a lookout for that. And very lastly, Sid, if someone has a question and wants to reach out and discuss, what's the best platform?
I'm available on LinkedIn. I respond to everyone who just me out to LinkedIn or anything, and that's somewhere. I'm not on much social platforms, but LinkedIn definitely I'm there available. You can just there me
Awesome.
or
Cool.
you can mail me. I can share the mail IDs and everything.
Yeah, cool. I'll drop your email and the link to your LinkedIn in the description section. Then that's all for today,
Thank you,
folks.
Surya.
And thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Bye.